I'm Travis Merrill, and I teach viola at San Diego State University. Today I want to talk to you about William Primrose. Primrose was one of the greatest violists that ever lived, and in particular he was really admired for his fluent and expressive bow arm. In my own playing, I really aspired to imitate some of the qualities of Primrose's playing, and today I want to share with you Primrose's own words on how to develop an expressive bow arm, and we'll use many of his exercises along with exercises from teachers like Paul Rolland and some ideas that I've come up with myself. Let's get started. We're lucky to have many of Primrose's ideas about using the bow in the great book Playing the Viola, Conversations with William Primrose by David Dalton. In that book and in those interviews, Primrose talks about how to think about down and up bows in a slightly different way. Now in English, when we talk about down and up bows, the direction of the bow, it's important to think about those aren't really great descriptors of what we're actually doing with the bow, right? The only place that the viola is on the viola that we're really playing with the bow moving down and up is on the A string, right? On the other strings, we're moving more from side to side. So they're not great words for the direction. And in other languages, they use other words for this. So Primrose points out that in French, they use the words Tirez and poussez. And these words translate to pull and to push. It's important to think about what are we pulling and pushing. Of course, you could say we're pulling and pushing the bow, which is true. But even more fundamentally, we're pulling and pushing the string with the bow hair. And if we think about organizing all of our physical motions around this really fundamental concept of string playing, which is rubbing the bow hair on the string, then a lot of great things can happen really quickly. Now let's go a little bit deeper on this idea of pulling and pushing the string. Now, one really simple explanation or demonstration I like to make of this is using our hands. So if this is the string and this is my bow hair, I want to feel a very smooth rubbing of the bow hair against the string. Now, the thing that's important to think about is that friction, that rubbing, will feel different depending on the contact point that you play on. Now, for example, if I play near the fingerboard where the tension on the string is looser, then the friction that I'm able to access is much lighter, almost as if my hand is barely touching the other one. If I'm playing about halfway between the bridge and the fingerboard, I'm going to feel a deeper friction. So now I'm starting to generate a little heat in my hands. And then if I'm playing right next to the bridge, where the tension on the string is really high, I'm going to have a very deep friction. And experimenting with that in your own bowing to explore those different kinds of friction is a really great way to develop a more sensitive contact and understanding of the connection between the bow hair and the string. One big difference between playing the violin and viola that Primrose talks about is the importance of the use of arm weight when we're bowing. Now on the violin, the strings are thinner. You don't need a lot of weight, even when you're playing relatively strongly or relatively fully, to engage the string. On the other hand, with the viola, like the cello or the bass, are thicker strings, respond slower. They need more weight in order to get them vibrating. Now, arm weight is one of those things that sometimes is tricky to get people to feel, and I have a few suggestions for how to start using arm weight and feeling arm weight when you're bowing. The first exercise we're going to do to feel the weight of our arm is to just flop it onto our shoulder and let it hang. Now, you can, with your arm in that position, simply move your elbow up and down with your other hand, and you can feel, if you've really relaxed that weight into your shoulder, how heavy the arm is. And this is really all the weight that we need in order to make any sound on the instrument. It's more weight than we need to make any sound on the instrument. But accessing that can sometimes be difficult, and we'll talk about how to do that some more in a minute. So practice a few times just moving your arm up and down as if your left hand is an elevator for your right arm. Again, relaxing the weight of your arm into the other hand. And then you can do the same thing without the other hand and feel how the muscles in your back and your shoulder are helping to elevate the arm as one unit. The next thing you can try is an exercise from Paul Rolland called rolling. We're going to put our pinky, with my pinky facing up, my palm is facing up, it's my left pinky in the tip of the bow, and I'm just going to roll my arm, or roll the bow up and down. So again, I'm feeling the arm move as one unit. What I'm trying not to do is move it in sort of a wavy or snaky fashion, but to feel the whole thing move together. And that becomes really powerful when we employ that on the bow. Now, if we try a couple of these things on the instrument, we can practice simply flopping the weight of our arm gently onto the instrument and feeling that hanging sensation of our whole arm on the instrument. Feel how that's really quite heavy pulling down on the instrument. We're not going to need that much weight, but it's helpful to feel the full weight of the arm. And then with the bow in the hand, we can do the same thing. Just flop the bow onto the string. And then we can also try this Rolland exercise of rolling across all the strings, feeling our arm move as one unit. And it's really helpful to practice this in different parts of the bow. So let's apply some of these principles with the bow and the instrument. And we're going to do that by just playing some open strings in the lower half of the bow. We'll use a slightly different plan of attack when we're playing in the upper half. So focus just on playing on the lower half of the bow. And when you play on the C string, imagining, you can use Primrose's analogy of feeling that there is a rope attached to your elbow. And imagine that rope is going all the way down into the floor, and that there's a hole in the floor, the rope's going through it, and on the other end of that rope, there's someone pulling on the rope. So you can really imagine that feeling of your arm relaxing the arm weight down towards the floor. And I'm going to do that first just playing on the C string. I'm going to think about pulling the string from the left side, thinking about the string not as something flat, but it's a cylinder, right? And to think about playing on the left part of the string on the down bow and the right part of the string on the up bow. So you're pulling from the left side, pushing across the string from the right side. And just playing in the lower half of the bow. When you're thinking about arm weight and experimenting with using more or less, it's important to realize that where you play matters, right? As we discussed earlier, the tension on the string is higher, closer to the bridge. So to really use the most arm weight and release the most weight from your back and from your shoulders, you want to be playing closer to the bridge. If you want to practice using less arm weight, you'll move a little bit further away, but to experiment with how much arm weight you need on each particular contact point. As you're experimenting with how much arm weight to use the sound and use the friction of the bow hair to really be your guide. If you're able to maintain a consistent friction and you're able to maintain a consistent sound, then those are really good indicators that you're using the right amount of weight for your particular contact point that you're playing on. If you hear this scratch, what Simon Fisher calls the low frequency scratch, that's a good sign that you're moving the bow either too slowly or with too much weight. Or if you hear the high frequency scratch, that's an indicator that you're moving the bow either with not enough weight or too quickly. Next, we're going to practice using arm weight as we move from string to string. Now, what I really like to think about is as I'm moving from string to string, that the weight of my arm is falling down towards the ground, or again, you can imagine that idea of someone pulling on a rope with your elbow, but that you're dragging the weight of your arm from one string level to the next. This will result in really smooth string crossings with a really deep sound. So just practice going between, for now, a pair of strings back and forth, rolling from one level to another. Let's talk about applying arm weight in the upper half of the bow. Now, this idea of really sinking down with the whole arm as a unit into the string works really well when you're playing in the lower half of the bow. When you play in the upper half of the bow, it doesn't work as well, and that's because we're getting so far away from the source of the weight that we end up having to put a lot of pressure on our fingers in order to make the sound. So if I'm starting at the frog and I just drag the weight, right when I get to about the middle or so, I find that I'm now having to press a lot with my fingers in order to create the same amount of sound. Now, our fingers are not very strong, and the muscles in there are going to tire really easily. Plus, you're going to most likely end up with a pinch sound if you're trying to generate the sound through your fingers. So instead, try what Paul Rolland recommends, which is as you come to the upper part of the bow, imagine you're turning a doorknob with your entire arm, and you'll feel that your upper arm will rise slightly as you come to the upper half. And that leverage from your upper arm will help to generate the sound with the least amount of effort possible. So if I start at the frog, as I get to about the midpoint, my upper arm will come slightly, and then it will drop again as I come down. This is a really subtle motion. I like to think that my elbow is making a little bit of a smile as it comes to the upper half, but it makes for great ease in your bowing, great fluidity in your bowing. Now, when you're experimenting with this, just as we are experimenting with weight in the lower half, really think about how the string and the sound are affected by how much you're rotating your upper arm as you come to the upper half. Really let the sound and the feeling, the friction, be your guide rather than some arbitrary how high or low you have to put it. So experiment with playing even just in the upper half a little bit by itself. Pulling on the down bow, pushing across on the up bow. Let's incorporate this idea of pulling and pushing using the whole bow and moving across all of the strings. I'm going to start off playing across just 2 strings using the whole bow and feeling how my arm drags the weight in the lower half and then arches into the string as if I'm turning a doorknob in the upper half. I'll do that first with playing across 2 strings, then 3, and then 4. To try this in a more complicated setting, you can try an exercise that Ysaye hand wrote for Primrose on an autographed picture that he gave him. And this really allows us to feel, on the one hand, how to use our fingers while we're doing this motion, but also how to move very smoothly across the strings so that we're always following the curvature of the bridge, that we're never moving across the strings in any sort of jerky manner, but that we're really feeling the levels in between each string, so that it's not just one string, one string, one string, one string, but it's actually a really smooth arc that we play in when we're moving across all of the strings. And this results in really beautifully seamless string crossings. Thanks for watching this video on the basics of sound production according to William Primrose. If you'd like to download a worksheet with the exercises from this video, along with some additional ways to practice more complicated settings of these ideas in Kreutzer and Dünnes, please click the button above and you'll be able to download that from my website. I'll be making more videos like this on William Primrose's ideas about playing the viola, specifically about using the bow. So if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you for the next one.